Hello, friends. Welcome back to another NBA Insider video live stream notebook right here on the one and only Bleacher Report app. And as always, we thank all of our viewers and watchers on YouTube as well. My name is Jake Fischer, your resident NBA insider for all things Bleacher Report. And we have, as always, another loaded show of news and notes from around the NBA. You see the ticker there on the screen. We are in preseason action. The Knicks and the Sixers tipped off yesterday in Abu Dhabi. More games are coming, but I think the show has to start off today with a highlight of a player who is not expected to be playing anytime soon. However, the news and the video of Jayson Tatum being back on the floor for his recovery in Boston is something that took the league by surprise throughout this media day week that we are currently in. Let's call it week 0 of the NBA preseason. You see the video right there. Jayson Tatum on the floor in Brighton, Alston. Where exactly is the Celtics practice facility? Down the Mass Pike. But look at him dribbling, shooting, out there, running. I mean, just a pretty remarkable turnaround. I saw a clip of him on ESPN talking about how he, Tyrese Halliburton, Damian Lillard are all in a torn Achilles recovery group text. A little birdie told me today that Damian Lillard got out on the floor in Portland too and was just blistering from deep in a shooting drill. So these guys are all just able to come back from this stuff much different, with a much simpler process than it used to be. You know, Kevin Durant back in 2019, his torn Achilles is like something of a different lifetime, where we kind of take for granted the fact that he's just kind of turned his career back into he's had his own little ankle and knee stuff along the way, but we don't really think of Kevin Durant as someone who has been, doomed by a torn Achilles. So what does this mean in terms of Jayson Tatum's ultimate return? But there's definitely buzz that Tatum could potentially be back sometime in March, as you see on our chyron at the bottom of the screen. Now, as Mountain Sun is saying in the chat, that is crazy. They probably made vast improvements in surgery and recovery. That is certainly true. And as we're also seeing in the chat here, I can't exactly read the commenter's name, a little blurry, but it'd be crazy for him to come back in March. That's, I think, the ultimate detail here. And Hector Banana Bread said that. I think that's the ultimate detail here, is that the context of Boston's season will be very important for what ultimately is for Jayson Tatum's return. Someone here is saying they won't let him play until he's 100%. I completely agree with that. But what happens if it's 100% and Boston is somewhere in the playoff picture? The Celtics don't have any type of Indiana Pacers style gap year idea in mind. While you can compare the two situations, of course, the Pacers let Miles Turner walk in for agency. Boston actively traded away Kristaps Porzingis and Drew Holiday. But from all my conversations around the league, the Celtics still seem to have more of an idea or a hope of being competitive in the East by comparison to the Indiana Pacers. That's not to say that the Celtics expect themselves to be competing for a championship. I don't think anyone in Boston views this current Celtics roster without Drew Holiday and Kristaps Porzingis, without Al Horford, as a team that is going to be competing with the likes of Cleveland and New York, and even, if healthy, comparing it to Philadelphia's roster. I don't think that Boston really does consider themselves a championship contender at this season at all. But with a top 4 of Peyton Pritchard, Jaylen Brown, Derek White, not necessarily in this order, Sam Hauser, there's some excitement about what Neemias Queta has done this summer and FIBA stuff. Luka Garza, there's some hope that he could be a legitimate frontcourt piece. Chris Boucher, was a nice addition on the margins that I think Boston is excited about. A playoff tested guy from the Toronto Raptors. Like the Celtics do consider themselves a team, to my understanding, that's going to be in the mix for the play-in tournament, for the back of the Eastern Conference playoff picture. And if they are, and if Tatum is 100% healthy, and if he wants to play, there's at least some thought right now that maybe that could happen. I'm not expecting it, to be clear. I am not expecting it at all. I think if Boston finds themselves anywhere in the bottom half of the Eastern Conference playoff bracket, that's more of a win for those guys, the Peyton Pritchards of the world. I've been saying this here. I've been saying this privately. I think Peyton Pritchard has a really good chance of making an all-star campaign this year, just with the opportunity that he's going to have and the numbers that he's already put up in increased opportunities and minute loads and whatever. So there's still belief that Boston could be competitive enough to warrant a Jayson Tatum early return. I don't think so. But this is still a market development and something that is definitely getting people excited and something that we're going to have to track throughout this upcoming 2025-2026 season that, again, is underway in preseason action. We had the Sixers and the Knicks already getting things going yesterday in Abu Dhabi, which gave a little glimpse into one of the biggest preseason storylines of this summer or of this fall that I'm going to be keeping an eye on, where Pacom Dadie, the Knicks first round pick from a year ago, started. I'm pulling up the statistics right now. He started in, I guess, Josh Hart's spot, playing 15 minutes, 4 points. You see Big Nick energy with the GIF. Look, I was on the phone all morning and into this afternoon before we came live to you today, Friday, October 3rd, 3 p.m. Eastern Time. Hard to not see this as New York showcasing their prospect with the thought that New York is going to have to make a trade in order to keep both of Malcolm Brogdon and Landry Shamet, which is a scenario that we have talked about previously here on our Bleacher Report NBA Insider video live stream notebooks, as well as been writing about on my joint Substack effort with the Hall of Famer Mark Stein at the Steinline at markstein.substack.com. New York does not get both of Malcolm Brogdon and Landry Shamet to sign Exhibit 9 non-guaranteed training camp deals if they have not conveyed some type of messaging to both of those players and both of those players' representatives that there is an opportunity to move another player on the roster to keep both of those guys. So that is something in play here. And without a doubt, 3 different people with 3 different teams today said to me, are the Knicks showcasing Pacom Dadie? And it's something that I think is another indicator that there's the highlight right there from NBA France. Dadie to the basket and one, up and under finish. 2 things here. Dadie, I don't think would have been a first-round pick unless he agreed to take 80% of the rookie scale contract slotted to his number 25 slot in the 2024 NBA draft. Number 1. Number 2, you're either going to have to move him or Tyler Kolek in this extrapolated out into the future scenario where New York has to move someone in order to keep both of Malcolm Brogdon and Landry Shamet. So a cap guy today also was saying to me, I don't know the specifics, he didn't really get into it, but he was just saying that it's a cleaner deal for moving Dadie as opposed to Kolek. And there's enough belief right now, to my understanding from talking to other teams, that Dadie is considered enough of a neutral asset, someone that New York wouldn't necessarily have to pay compensation to get off of. Maybe they could get a second-round pick back in exchange for him. So we're going to see how all of this unfolds. But the very first preseason game happening yesterday in Abu Dhabi has the league already talking about roster chicanery and transaction stuff? And does this starting move for Dadier signal New York showcasing him for a potential trade? The Knicks are very well aware, and they've already started to have conversations externally, to my understanding, about having to make a deal to keep these veterans on their roster. Will it potentially be Pacom Dadier? That is definitely a storyline we're going to monitor. We are also going to be keeping an eye on the back of the Milwaukee Bucks roster throughout this preseason because they are up against cap restrictions and they've got some non-guaranteed deal situations that the league is certainly eyeing. Number one, Andre Jackson Jr. has a non-guaranteed contract that has a deadline of right before the start of the regular season, and that would potentially put him at risk of being waived or traded as well. Before we continue with the Bucks, I just want to step back to New York for a second because we have a chat question from Deadeye Treyway. Would the Knicks look to move other guys outside of Pac Home or just him really? There's been some speculation, educated speculation around the league about maybe Tyler Kolek, as we talked about. It's almost certainly going to either be Dadier or Kolek that has to be sent out just based off of the numbers with the Knicks being hard capped at the first apron and with the fact that there's no one else who's really on an expendable contract that's in New York's expected rotation under new head coach Mike Brown. The Bucks rotation is super fluid with all the changes that have been going on in Milwaukee dating back to the trade deadline where they sent out mainstay Chris Middleton for Kyle Kuzma. Of course, the big wave and stretch move putting Damian Lillard on waivers to bring in Miles Turner. That moves Kevin Porter Jr. in as the Bucks starting point guard as of now. And it leaves a lot of question marks around the periphery of Giannis Antetokounmpo and what the Bucks lineup will look like, that rotation will look like under head coach Doc Rivers, as he went out and confirmed over a media day Zoom that he was continuing to evaluate his future and what his future could look like in Milwaukee if the Bucks are not considered to be a championship contender in his eyes. And what that rotation looks like and the support he has around him is going to, of course, be very indicative of his ultimate interest in staying in Milwaukee long term. So they will have a decision to make. It seems, as of now, from my conversations, that one of Andre Jackson Jr., Chris Livingston, or Tyler Smith is not going to be in Milwaukee once this season comes to fruition, and that there's kind of a little mini roster battle going on for all those guys right now after the additions of Amir Coffey and other, those other little veteran moves that Milwaukee made. That's kind of where things stand with the Bucks right now. And Andre Jackson, someone that definitely has a lot of interest around the league, and he would have, I think, a handful of teams that be interested in picking him up if he were to get waived or to be looked at as a trade target. So that's our two NBA preseason storylines that we are going to watch. And we are going to be watching Jonathan Kuminga's role, impact, overall success in Golden State all season long after his very eventful standoff with the Warriors came to a conclusion this week before that October 1st deadline to sign the qualifying offer. He and his representation were threatening that. They were threatening taking a 1-year, $8 million QO all summer long. But you see it there. He has agreed to a 2-year, $48.5 million contract to return to Golden State. The second year is a team option. There's a trade kicker in this deal. So that full number isn't exactly $48.5 million, but it will get to $48.5 million if he is ultimately traded this season. And that is kind of what this story hinges on now and where the Kuminga Golden State relationship lies throughout this season up until the January 15th big trigger date when Kuminga will become eligible for trade. Now, the question coming in right now from NV Tricks is who could the Warriors get for Kuminga? And that is going to be the question that the Warriors are going to be asking themselves if they come to the decision that they are best equipped for contending now and in the future by trading Kuminga. That is exactly why the Warriors had every incentive to bring Kuminga back in on a deal north of 20 million in average annual value, way above the qualifying offer for sheer salary matching purposes, but also just to create a compelling trade package for anyone that they would want to go out on the market to acquire. The big names that are going to be always linked to Golden State are, of course, going to be LeBron and Giannis. But at this point in time, I don't really see how Golden State has the salary, has the players, has the draft capital to compete, especially for Giannis if he were to hit the open market as a trade candidate. But I think, generally speaking, anyone making north of 40, then all of a sudden you're talking about Golden State having to put in Buddy Hield and Moses Moody from salary, math trading standpoints, two players that the Warriors were very adamant in all sign and trade conversations for Kuminga himself this summer. They did not want to part with either of those players from a roster standpoint, from a rotation standpoint. And if they really want to go big, big, big game hunting, like they were with Larry Markkinen a year ago before Larry Markkinen signed his extension with the Utah Jazz that made him not trade eligible, trade ineligible for all of last season, then you're going to start to talk about Golden State having to put in someone like Brandon Podziemski as well. So for the Golden State Warriors to ultimately part with both of those players, both of Kuminga and Pods, they're going to be going after big, big, big fish. I think the names that they're probably far more likely to be involved with, we've talked about it before. Trey Murphy from New Orleans is someone that they've liked, but really anyone more in the 25 to 30 average annual value, that is going to be far more of a likely scenario for Golden State. I think primarily, though, the Warriors are going to hope that Jonathan Kuminga just comes in and, as someone who's going to be entering his fifth year with this program, just continues to make strides and continues to be the one blue chip young two-way prospect on their own roster they can develop internally. To me, that's the best case scenario for Golden State. That's someone that they drafted number 7 overall 4 years ago, just comes in, continues to develop, grows along this group, and achieves the ultimate goal that Joe Lacob and that front office have seen for him all along. I don't think that is the most likely scenario, but because head coach Steve Kerr has already shown and expressed some type of skepticism about Kuminga's fit in a front court that also has Jimmy Butler and Draymond Green. Does adding Al Horford and his three-point shooting better that fit? Maybe. I think we will definitely see at times a lineup that is Steph, Kuminga, Jimmy Butler, Draymond Green, Al Horford. They have to try that. They just have to try that from a defensive standpoint. Will that additional shooting from Horford ease any concerns internally or just the overall actual on the court struggles, weaknesses of lack of shooting around Steph with Jimmy and Draymond and Kuminga on the floor? That's something I think Golden State is going to look at very, very closely. Hayden wants to know, is there still interest from Chicago or SAC for Kuminga, or after the deal has that kind of died? The Kings don't just snap their fingers and not have interest in Jonathan Kuminga anymore because this current situation is over. We talk about this all the time from a projecting standpoint. What happened at a previous transaction cycle, so this offseason, is going to be very important come this trade deadline as well. Teams that have shown interest in players in the past, Golden State, for example, called and called and called and had conversations with Indiana about about Buddy Hield for years, where the Pacers had interest in Andrew Wiggins and they've had interest in Jonathan Kuminga. Like Buddy Hield, all of a sudden, a couple years later, coming back to Golden State was not a surprise. So Chicago still having interest in Kuminga, Sacramento still having interest in Kuminga, Phoenix having interest in Kuminga. That's not going to go away. It's not going to go away. Will the likelihood of a deal change? The thing with Sacramento is, and for all these teams, number one, there's an increased chance of a trade for Jonathan Kuminga, I think, across the board if the Golden State Warriors and Kuminga across the table as well agree that a trade is best for both sides. Because now, once you get to January 15th and Kuminga's trade eligible, you're not going to have the tricky base year compensation rule that comes in a sign and trade for restricted free agency in the summer, where you have to send out imbalanced roster math. Now, the Warriors won't have to take back 50% of what's going in the door. With Sacramento, though, the big hiccup for that trade talk was that the Warriors did not have any interest in Malik Monk's contract, and the Kings weren't giving a legitimate pick. They were giving a conditional 2030 pick in any overture they made to Golden State. If Malik Monk is balling out, if that pick becomes a guaranteed, unprotected pick at some point in time, then you could see some movement in that trade conversation, I think. But overall, I think for Golden State, they're going to only be wanting to move Kuminga primarily for someone that they think is at this juncture, now that he's signed, better than Jonathan Kuminga and raises their title window. I don't think they're just going to move him now for a salary that's intriguing and draft capital. I think if anything, they would do that to flip that for someone else. They're going to be in buying mode. They're not going to be in selling mode. So if you want to try to pinpoint or predict a Jonathan Kuminga trade, same thing with Chicago. I think it would end up being for someone like a Trey Murphy that Golden State deems as a hand in glove fit, a perfect addition, a better complementary piece to their core than Jonathan Kuminga, as opposed to selling him for parts, draft picks, what have you. So that's kind of, I think, the ultimate thing to keep in mind. Because on the flip side, the other restricted free agent situation that came to a conclusion this week was Quentin Grimes taking a 1-year qualifying offer, which I think is a pretty subpar, suboptimal outcome for the Sixers. He has a no trade clause. Kuminga doesn't, so the Warriors can trade him wherever they want. Quentin Grimes inherently, by taking that qualifying offer, just like Cam Thomas, has a no trade clause in his deal, and Quentin Grimes is only at $8 million. So Philly staying under the apron, though, gives them an opportunity to still aggregate salaries together to go out and get somebody. But ultimately, the Warriors really wanted to bring Kuminga back at a bigger number to maintain this trade flexibility compared to someone or another team like the Sixers, who I think were far more focused on keeping Quentin Grimes' salary number low. So that, I think, is really the ultimate outcome and the big piece of this puzzle for the Warriors, is that they wanted Kuminga's salary high to be able to go out and acquire someone, not sell him to go potentially use him to buy. Again, if he doesn't work out and turn into the exact rotation piece that they are hoping, and they've always been hoping that he could become in between Steph and Draymond in their lineup. Speaking of lineups, there's been a lot of talk online this week about what the best 5-man group for the Lakers will be, in addition to Luka, LeBron, Austin Reeves, and new big man DeAndre Ayton. There's been a lot of buzz about should the Lakers start Marcus Smart or longtime starter Rui Hachimura. Now, I think this is an interesting question, particularly because Rui is extension eligible and he is in the final year of his contract that pays him $18 million, which theoretically also makes Rui Hachimura the best potential outgoing trade salary that the Lakers have on their roster, kind of similar to Jonathan Kuminga in Golden State. The Lakers can combine Rui and Gabe Vincent and get to $29 million pretty quickly. Now, Klein is saying in the chat, you got to start Rui, right? And I think that's probably where things will lean. That's where JJ Redick leaned most of the year. Remember, he even started small with Rui at center in the playoffs. Thrasher is asking, maybe it's an offensive or defensive scheme fit. He thinks Smart is better for the defense, but that Rui is better for the offense. And we'll see. We'll see how, I mean, Marcus Smart has not really been healthy for 2 straight years now. So, how effective will he ultimately be now that he's in a new situation in Los Angeles? That's probably a big factor of all this as well. But the fact that Rob Pelinka came out publicly at Media Day this week and said that the Lakers are having Rui conversations for extension is interesting. I wonder, putting that out publicly, is there some type of advantage for the Lakers in saying that? Is there some type of signaling around the league to say, hey, we like this guy. We're thinking about extending him when they'll inevitably turn around and put him in trade conversations? Maybe. JJ the Clown is saying start Rui and Smart and put Austin Reeves in the sixth man of the year conversation. That's interesting. I don't know if Austin Reeves needs to really be in the sixth man of the year conversation because he's basically going to be the lead ball handler whenever Luka's off the floor anyway. So that lineup balancing you can just do when whether that's the classic you sub out one of those guys at the 9 minute mark, and whether that's Luka being subbed out for a breather or Reeves going to the bench so that he can come back in when Luka does go out, end of the first quarter kind of thing. That's a pretty tried and true staggering lineup that move that coaching staffs do around the league. So we'll see. But big year for Austin Reeves in a contract year, who, depending on how the rest of the league shakes out, Austin Reeves could be one of the premier free agents come next summer, which is something we've talked about on the show before, and we'll definitely be monitoring all year long. But I think this question of Rui and Smart is most interesting again because Rui is extension eligible right now. Rob Pelinka has already come out and publicly said that they are looking at potentially extending him. And he is also simultaneously the best potential outgoing trade salary for the Lakers to go out and make an improvement, whether that's something like Andrew Wiggins in Miami that we've heard from multiple sources is someone that is on the Lakers trade radar, or another type of two-way wing. We'll see. The last thing we'll say here is that someone was saying that the Austin Reeves Luka defensive pairing is going to be a bit atrocious. Well, that's why ideally you get DeAndre Ayton to come in and help fortify the back line of your lineup. But also, the hope is definitely that Luka being in better shape will help at least be more of a presence. It's not going to be a defensive stopper, but Reeves also fights out there. He really does compete on the defensive side of the ball, even though he's not a stopper in his own right. I don't think the Lakers are so concerned about the defensive weaknesses of those two as a pairing. I think they're far more excited about what they can do together on the offensive side of the ball. Our final topic here, the first rookie scale extension of the fall. We had Paolo Banchero and Chet Holmgren come in the summer, and Jabari Smith came in the summer as well. But Nikola Jovic signed a 4-year, $62.4 million deal. And it's interesting because that deal, as you see, goes through 2030. And depending on what Miami does with the aforementioned Andrew Wiggins, whether they trade him to the Lakers or somewhere else or keep him, the Heat basically don't have any cap space moving forward now. And Miami was a team that we had been hearing was kind of clearing their books and getting themselves set to be players in free agency both in 2026 and 2027. So maybe this is a bit of a signal that they're not so bullish on the 2026 free agent market, or it could just simply be something that they really like Jovic internally. He showed some really strong flashes in Eurobasket, in FIBA play with Serbia and that national team, and that he is an analytical darling. I was talking to a couple of cap strategists around the league about this deal, and there was definitely a team that indicated that the numbers are just off the charts for what Jovic projects out to. As you see, Jovic, Polish Hammer is saying Jovic is nice, but this seems like an overpay now. Well, this deal is all about projection, and those numbers, the analytical models are projecting what he could do in more consistent playing time as he gets older. He's still only 22 years old with a ton of high level international experience that a lot of teams are bullish will end up projecting and actually translating to the NBA. And the Heat are not exactly in a contending situation right now. They've made various moves, whether it was trading Haywood Highsmith and replacing him with Drew Smith, to focus on maintaining future and current salary flexibility below the first apron. So you get Nikola Jovic locked in at right around the mid-level for the next 4 years. I think around the league, from my early conversations about this, it's been considered a pretty big value win for both sides. For Miami to get him at that number, and for a 22-year-old to lock in a fully guaranteed $62.4 million, it's a hell of a lot of money. With a great season, getting out in a restricted free agency next year, or yeah, restricted free, could he have been worth 480, maybe even the 4 100 that Josh Giddey signed after a strong year? It's possible. But if you're that good, you get back into free agency at 26 years old before you enter your prime with another chance to earn $100 million. So I think this has been considered a pretty big win for both sides around the league. And for now, we're going to wait and see what the rest of the rookie scale extension market could bring. I have to make more calls on this today. I'll be writing about this. We'll be talking about this, as that deadline is not till the end of October before the regular season starts. But there's not a lot more as of now rookie scale extensions that teams and agents are expecting around the league. We'll touch on that more next week. We will get to two more chats here before we get out of here. Hayden says he has a lot of potential, that being Jovic. I don't mind the deal as a Heat fan. So there's a stamp of approval from someone repping South Beach. And Ghost 316 wants to know, wouldn't the Heat need to trade Adebayo to sign anyone meaningful in free agency? Well, I think the whole thought for Miami would be to add to Bam Adebayo and Tyler Hero, not subtract Bam Adebayo and change everything. Bam Adebayo has become the new standard bearer of Heat culture, and Jimmy Butler said it himself during the end of that tenure a year ago that he was already feeling it becoming more of Bam and Tyler Hero's team and not his team, which started to provoke all of his end of days activity in Miami. So, if anything, Jovic is here to stay in a lineup that is definitely highlighted by Bam Adebayo and Tyler Hero, and any other future minutia maneuverings from the Heat. It's with an eye towards adding to that group with Bam Adebayo front and center, pun intended. So that's it for today's show. We will be back next week with more preseason rookie scale extension updates. I'm sure there'll be some trade chatter, what have you. But for now, we appreciate you all tuning in today. And we'd appreciate it if you came back again next week for another NBA Insider video live stream notebook right here on Bleacher Report. See ya.